There is a second language acquisition. The teammates consist of Alejandra, Brandon, Sergio, y Blanca, the best team in the world. And the theories that we're gonna cover is this one. There are four. Don't know how to count. Behaviorist theory, Natisma, theory cognitive, and social culture. And the first one that is gonna to present is Alejandra.
One of the pioneers of behaviorism was B.F. Skinner, who provided one of the early scientific explanations of language acquisition. This theory had a powerful influence on second and foreign language teaching between the 40s and the 70s. Infants learn oral language from other human role models through a process involving imitation, rewards, and practice. These role models in an infant's environment provide stimuli and rewards. The major principle of the behaviorist theory rests on the analysis of human behavior and observable stimulus response, the interaction and the association between them. Basically, the behaviorist theory considers all learning to be the establishments of habits as a result of reinforcement and regards. Behaviorism doesn't account for all kinds of language learning since it disregards the mind activity observable behaviorism doesn't explain some learning, such as the recognition of new language patterns by young children which are not being reinforced. And the last one will be, if regards plays such importance in language development, what about the parent who is inattentive or not present when the child attempts speech? If a baby's language learning is motivated entirely by regards, will speech stop when there are no regards? And finally, the impact it has on L2 learning. In the language teaching area, behaviorism is the background of exercises, either oral or writing that view stimulus and response. It has a great impact by influencing language teaching methods, for instance, audiolingual method, total physical response, silent way, and situational language teaching. Embody the behaviorist of language.
For me, is the innatist theory that it was the art of Noah Chomsky. That he was invented on 1950s, 59 or 1960s. What he says in general belief is every child who takes a birth on this earth, he already knows the basic grammatical rules when he interacts with his parents, with elderly. He actually learned vocabulary, but grammar he's already knows. But now, as he said, and to detail on what he said, majority of people, including professional, want to know if a person, when he's born with a clean slate, that means is he the child has no knowledge of the rules of grammar, or is he born with some basic knowledge of language and grammar? So Chomsky was the first person to say that the human brain is pre-wired with some basic rules of language. He says that when a child is born, he or she will born in a world with a basic set of language skills. That means he or she does not have a clean slate. His mind is not empty. He already knows some language acquisition device or LAD, and they're in his brain, due to which he is able to learn language so quickly. So before Chomsky, psychoanalytical thinkers, they believe that how a child learns by observing, and then imitating their parents or other people around him. Chomsky was the first person who said that the child already has basic rule of grammatical and language learning. So to summarize on what he said, or the explanation is that if you look at the across different cultures, you'll find that all language they have the same basic structure, like the verb, the noun, and the object, and the structure have the right. And in Christians, These are the four main criticisms that is lacking on this theory, and the first one is lacks sufficient scientific evidence. What it means that it's not possible to prove its existence because it's a abstract theory. And the other one is not practical in the actual teaching learning situation. This means that research proves that the children learns language similar to the ones she is exposed to. The other one is does not take into account social environments. Language acquisition depends on the environments. Sometimes this theory doesn't keep in mind on some children that, for example, doesn't have any parents or is living in a poor area or a rich area, so that doesn't keep in mind. Too much emphasis on adult linguistic competence, not enough emphasis on language acquisition. Now, in the impact on auto learning, and in my research, I think this doesn't impact really much on the auto learning because it's a very abstract theory and doesn't have very scientific proofs, so it's not really used as often as much of a theory.
The theory of cognitive development was developed by Jean Piaget, and it was proposed in the year 1936. Uh, it's generally believed to be a conscious and reason thinking process, and it starts with assimilation and finishes with accommodation. Uh, Assimilation being the the way the person takes information and makes sense of it, and accommodation and assimilation go hand in hand. When one accommodates, he or she is using assimilation to change her or her thought patterns. Um, what we know about cognitive development, thanks to Jean Piaget and his theories, is that he said that children's cognitive skills unfold naturally as they explore their environment, and going through four stages of cognitive development known as the sensory motor stage, the pre-operational stage, the concrete operational stage, and the formal operational stage. Uh, some of the practices teachers use that can be considered cognitive cognitive are like visual maps, mind maps, reviews, summaries, analysis, and topics of discussion. Uh, the main criticism from the part of Lev Vygotsky would claim that Piaget did not take cultural differences in consideration. As I already said, like the way like cognitive development affects the class, at least for the part for the teacher, are like visual stuff such as mind maps and discussions where like the students make sense of what they can.
Social cultural theory of Vygotsky. The author is Lev Vygotsky. The year it's published, that it was published is 1934. The general believes that this theory is also considered cognitive because they linked factors such as the social and cultural as a necessary part of a learning theory. Vygotsky worked the more knowledge order and the zone of proximal development. The more knowledge order is that it has a better understanding of the topics that they can explain in a certain levels to have a master of that. Vygotsky sees the zone of proximal development as an area like a sensitive instruction or guidance should be given for students because they can develop their skills higher. The examples in the classroom of teaching, students can develop to have activities or tasks, and Vygotsky views interaction with peers as an effective way of developing skills and strategies. The criticisms, the most important is concerns the assumption that it is relevant to all cultures. The concept of scaffolding, which is heavy dependent of verbal instructions and observation and practice. They can be effective ways of learning certain skills. And they also can have an impact or an effect on second language learning because they can demonstrate several implications such as developmentally appropriate, provide practice in the zone of proximal development, cooperative learning activities, scaffolding, collaborate learning, simulate the cultural content of the language, as an example, role playing. They can tell storytelling and they can have a contextualization for the knowledge.